Welcome to the Cyber Center for Biblical Studies. Hi, my name is Herb Bateman. Today we want to investigate and introduce you to a book in a series known as the 40 Questions series. We have with us today both the author and editor for the series, Ben Merkle, New Testament professor at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in North Carolina. Ben, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. Tell us about a little bit about your book. First, give us the title, and then tell us what the thesis of this book is.
Okay, it's in the 40 Questions series, so it's 40 questions. That's how all the books begin. So it's 40 questions about elders and deacons. And, as far as thesis goes, really the thesis is to take the tough questions that people are asking, or the questions that people have come up with, or questions that are out there, and really give a succinct answer to those questions. Now, if you were to push me and say, okay, but where are you coming from? What's your perspective? I would say fair enough, although I do try to at times just be merely descriptive. So I might introduce and describe a view that I don't necessarily agree with. And you find that in the series where you might have various views on something, and the author may lean towards one, but he wants to fairly and accurately portray that particular view. So if you're to push me, and I'm assuming you are, I would say, well, I'm approaching this topic from somebody who's a congregationalist, so I affirm congregationalism. I also argue for a plurality of leaders, a plurality of elders or pastors or overseers, and I do use those terms interchangeably. I think they're referring to the same office in the New Testament. And then the office of deacon, elders and deacons. And if I were to make a distinction between the two, I would say the task, the function of the elders is the Word of God in prayer. They are to shepherd. They are to oversee the congregation. What do the deacons do? Well, yes, we find a lot of people say that deacons focus on benevolence. I think that's part of it. But I would say that's in the particular context. If you look at Acts 6, for example, I would say that was an example of a greater principle, that is, the function of the deacons is to do what's necessary to allow the elders, the pastors, to focus on their primary role of the Word of God in prayer, shepherding God's people. So they're the ones who come alongside and focus on the other tasks so that the elders, the pastors, can focus on their task.
Okay. Well, so we got these 40 questions on elders and deacons. Is this just a run-on 40 questions of pastors and deacons, or is this book somehow divided into units of thought? How's it?
Well, a book like this, to really make it work well, you have to have a good structure. So I really try to focus on having a good structure that flows through, that makes sense, that's logical, that progresses through, and at the same time somebody can come in, just see a question they like and jump in and still get an answer without reading around that particular issue, that particular question. So in this particular volume, it's really easy to structure this one. You have two issues, elders and deacons. So the first 6 questions are introductory questions, laying out why is this important? Why is this issue, the idea of church leadership, who runs the church, what are the qualifications? Well, that's important. Mm-hmm. You might think, well, there are other issues that are more important than the way you structure your church. That's secondary. And my response would be, yes, that to an extent. There are other more important issues like the Trinity or who Jesus is. But at the same time, what can be more important than who leads the church? Mm. What do they do? Mm-hmm. So the first section is introductory issues. I'm setting out the different types of church government, church polity. I'm arguing for congregationalism. I'm explaining the 2 offices in the local church of pastor, elder, or overseer, and that of deacon. The second section is really the bulk of the book. 27 questions on elders.
Wow.
Only 7 on deacons. Why? Well, elders comes up more times in the New Testament. I also see it as more foundational. So, for example, when Paul writes to Titus, who's in Crete, he references qualifications for elders, but none on deacons. So I see that as a secondary, those who come alongside and help. So the primary role of that I see given to the elders and the pastors. So 27 questions, but not just 27 questions, just kind of a litany of questions, but divided into 4 sections. So questions dealing with background. Okay, so what about the terms, the terminology? So looking at background issues. Then the next section deals with qualifications. Mm-hmm. So go into some detail about going through the qualifications that you have in 1 Timothy 3 and especially in Titus 1. Then some specific chapters on, some of those qualifications that are more debated. What does it mean that a leader needs to be the husband of one wife? Mm-hmm. What does it mean? Does he need to have children who are believers or children who are faithful? 2 different renderings, and depending on the translation you're using. Can women be elders? So I'm dealing with that issue. The third section dealing with the idea of plurality. What evidence is there in the Bible? What are the strengths? What are the advantages of having a plurality of elders? How do you, if a church wants to transition to a plurality of elders, how might that take place? What are the relationship between the elders? Is one above the others? So I'm dealing with those issues. The final section deals with, I guess, whatever's left over. How do you select elders? Must elders be appointed, ordained? The terminology used. Should they be paid? What about removing an elder? Because that comes up in 1 Timothy 5. So I deal with those issues. The last main topic is that of the deacons. So 7 questions on deacons, dealing with the background, looking at Acts 6, qualifications, relationship with the elders, and that sort of thing. And the issue of women. Can women be deacons? And I give the arguments for both sides.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I'm sensing that one of the things that spurred you to write this has perhaps coming out of what may be a perceived need for pastors. That how do you see this being helpful for pastors? And is my assumption correct?
Yes. So oftentimes the way it works is first the pastor will say, okay, this looks like it might be a helpful volume for me. It might help, in whatever reason, maybe there could be a variety of issues, but the pastor reads it, and this pastor says, there's some helpful stuff here. I'm going to get my church leadership team to read this. So then they read it. And then oftentimes they'll expand it beyond that and say, hey, let's get other people in the church. And I actually do have a companion volume called Why Elders, which deals with 4 questions of why a church should have elders. And the subtitle of that is, it's a practical handbook for church members. And so if the 40 questions maybe looks like it's too much for people in the church, and they maybe want to transition to an elder model, or they have a plurality, or they're just dealing with questions, that volume could be helpful. But really, it's not geared simply to the pastor, but it could be used in a course, on ecclesiology. If you're studying the pastoral epistles, because frankly, a lot of the issues are found. A lot of the answers and issues are going to be located in Paul's writing to Timothy and Titus. So,
okay, so on the one hand, this is great for a course on the study of the church, but on the other hand, it's helpful for a pastor, particularly if he wants his elders and deacons to better understand the offices, those 2 offices for their church. And then you have a supplement, because I think you're right. I think sometimes a book like 40 Questions may be a little too much for some people in the congregation. So tell me about this other book. Is this published by Kriegel?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
So basically what I wanted to do after I published the 40 questions, I thought, you know what, it might be helpful to give something a little bit more accessible. I think the 40 Questions book is accessible, but it's close to 300 pages or 250. So it's it's a shorter book. There are no footnotes. It's 100 pages. It answers 4 questions on why, either if a church has elders and somebody comes and they want to be a member and they're like, why does your church have elders? Well, here's a book to give to people who become members or are inquisitive. And so usually with that book, pastors get a hold of it, and then it's something the church buys and purchases for members of the congregation to educate them.
Very good. Ben, thank you so much for your work on this book, actually 2 books, to help us better understand leadership in the local church. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Enjoyed it.
Pleasure. And thank you for joining us. And I trust that this may be a book that might interest you. It's available on Amazon. Both books are available on Amazon. Both books are available through Kriegel Publishing online. So I trust that if this has spurred some interest in you, you'll pick the book up and read it and hopefully benefit from it. But in the meantime, I trust you'll have a great day. Thank you.